Adopted brother wants our inheritance. The loudest argument I've ever heard in my life happened in my parents' living room. My adopted brother, Kyle, was standing there, red-faced, veins popping in his neck, yelling that he deserved all of our parents' inheritance. Not a share, not an equal split, but every single penny. "I was the one they saved," he screamed, slamming his fist against the dining table so hard the silverware rattled. "Do you know what that means? They chose me. I'm not just some kid they happened to have. I'm the one they picked. That makes me the real heir." Everyone froze. My mom buried her face in her hands. My dad's jaw locked so tight I thought his teeth might crack. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Because in that moment, something I'd always known deep down, that Kyle was different, that he carried a chip on his shoulder about being adopted, came spilling out in the ugliest way possible. And then he turned to me. "You don't deserve any of it," he spat. "You were just born. You didn't earn it. I did." The room went silent. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear over it. And before anyone could say a word, Kyle stormed out, slamming the door so hard the wall shook. I stood there staring after him, my mind spinning with 100 questions. Did he mean it? Was he bluffing? And worst of all, what if he actually tried to take everything? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look in his eyes when he said those words. Cold, certain, dangerous. What I didn't know then was that his outburst wasn't just words said in anger. It was the beginning of a war. When I look back now, the warning signs had been there for years. Kyle was adopted when we were both little. He was 6, I was 4. My parents always made it clear. No difference, no real kid versus adopted kid. We were both theirs. But Kyle never let go of that title. Adopted, chosen, special. As we grew up, the cracks widened. Small things at first. He always compared our report cards, making sure his looked better. He had to sit at the head of the table when guests came over, saying it felt right. On birthdays, he always managed to make mine about him, complaining if his cake wasn't bigger or if his presents weren't better. Still, my parents tried to smooth everything over. "It's just Kyle being Kyle," my mom would say. "He needs reassurance." But reassurance only made him bolder. By the time we hit our 20s, Kyle started talking more openly about money. He was obsessed with it, reading about wills, taxes, estates. He'd joke, "When mom and dad kick it, I'll make sure you're taken care of." He said it with a smirk that never quite reached his eyes. I laughed it off back then, but now, with his outburst still echoing in my ears, those jokes didn't feel like jokes anymore. The next morning, I tried to talk to my parents. They looked exhausted, their faces pale like they hadn't slept either. "We'll handle it," Dad said flatly, cutting his eggs into tiny, angry pieces. "Kyle's not going to dictate what happens to this family." But his voice lacked the confidence I needed to hear, and my mom just kept staring at her coffee cup like it might swallow her whole. The whole day felt heavy, like waiting for a storm to break. I went to work, tried to focus, but every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. What if it was Kyle? What if he was planning something? When I got home that night, I found out he already had. Sitting on the kitchen counter was a thick envelope, my name scrolled across it in Kyle's messy handwriting. Inside was a copy of a letter, not written to me, but to my parents. It was from Kyle's lawyer, and it claimed that as their chosen son, Kyle was entitled to the entire inheritance. My hands shook as I read it, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't just rage. Kyle was serious. And now, he had the law on his side. The letter changed everything. I sat at the kitchen counter holding it like it was burning my hands. My parents came in behind me, their faces tight when they saw the envelope. My mom grabbed it, read it once, and nearly dropped it. My dad just stood there, his fists curling at his sides. "He actually hired a lawyer," she whispered. "He really thinks he can do this?" Dad snatched the letter back. "Entitled to the entire inheritance?" His voice was low, dangerous. "That's not how the law works. That's not how family works." But his anger didn't cover the fear I heard underneath. Because the truth was, we didn't know what Kyle was capable of anymore. That night turned into the first of many family meetings. Mom cried, saying she didn't want the family to fall apart over money. Dad was firm, saying Kyle had crossed a line that couldn't be smoothed over. Me, I just sat there numb, wondering how the boy I grew up with had turned into someone willing to sue his own family. The next morning, the fallout began. Kyle showed up at the house uninvited, wearing a pressed shirt and acting smug, like he'd already won. He sat in the living room and announced that he wasn't here to argue anymore. He was here to negotiate. "I'm not asking for everything," he said, dripping with fake generosity. "Not anymore. Just most of it. Say 80%. That's fair, right? I am the one who's been loyal." I almost laughed in his face. Loyal? Kyle hadn't been loyal a day in his life. My dad exploded. "You think threatening us with lawyers makes you look loyal? You think bullying your own family is loyalty? Let me tell you something. You won't see a single dime of this inheritance if I have anything to say about it." His smile didn't fade. He just leaned back in his chair like he'd been expecting that answer. "Then I guess the courts will decide, won't they?" Mom broke down right there. She begged him, sobbing, saying this wasn't what family does. He didn't even blink. He just said family is about who matters most, and you both know it's me. The room went silent. His words hung heavy, thick, poisonous. That was the first moment I realized Kyle wasn't just after the money. He wanted power, control. He wanted to prove something, that being chosen made him superior, even if it meant destroying us to prove it. Over the next few days, things spiraled. Calls from lawyers, letters in the mail, Kyle showing up at my work to talk, like he wanted to intimidate me. Friends started asking why I looked so tired. I didn't know what to say. My adopted brother is trying to steal my parents' inheritance. It sounded insane. But the lows were nothing compared to what came next. Because one night, when I thought I couldn't take the stress anymore, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message said, "You don't deserve it. I'll make sure you get nothing. Watch your back." I stared at it, my chest tightening. No name, no proof it was Kyle, but I knew. I knew. And in that moment, the fear became real. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was personal. The text sat on my screen like a glowing threat. I read it over and over, hoping maybe I was wrong, hoping it was some twisted prank. But deep down I knew. That was Kyle's voice, even without his name on it. I showed my parents. My mom burst into tears again, whispering, "He wouldn't hurt you, he wouldn't." But her words cracked in the middle, like even she didn't believe them. Dad's face turned dark. He grabbed his phone, muttering about calling the police. But when he stopped, finger hovering over the keypad, I saw the doubt. How could we prove it was him? It wasn't like Kyle signed his name at the bottom. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my window made me jump. At 3 a.m., I swore I heard footsteps on the porch. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for Kyle to strike again. I texted him, "We need to talk, in person, tonight." He replied instantly, like he'd been waiting for it. Finally. We met in a cafe across town, neutral ground. The moment I walked in, Kyle was already there, sipping black coffee like he owned the place. He looked up, smirked, and said, "You got my message." So he admitted it, just like that. I sat down hard, trying to steady my voice. "What are you doing, Kyle? Threatening me? Threatening Mom and Dad? This is insane." He leaned in close, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "What's insane is you thinking you're the real child. You don't get it, do you? They picked me. They chose me. And now everything they've built, everything they've saved, it should all be mine." Something in me snapped. "They chose to love us both. You're not special. You're just selfish." His smile vanished. His eyes turned cold, sharp. "Careful what you say. You don't know what I'm willing to do." I thought it was a bluff until he pulled something out of his jacket and slid it across the table. An envelope. I opened it and my stomach dropped. Inside were copies of private family documents, bank statements, old letters, even a draft of the will. "You think I'm bluffing?" he whispered. "I've been preparing for this for years." The weight of those papers pressed down on me. He had everything. Proof. Leverage. And then he said the words that froze me to my seat. "If you don't back down, I'll make sure you lose more than just money." The cafe noise faded. The clinking cups, the chatter, the hiss of the espresso machine. It all blurred. I was locked on his face, that cold certainty. I realized then that Kyle wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. And sitting across from him, I knew I had a choice. Fight back or watch him burn my family to the ground. But before I could speak, before I could decide, Kyle leaned back, smirked again, and said, "You'll see soon enough." Then he stood, left the envelope on the table, and walked out. And I sat there, staring after him, my heart pounding, knowing this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The whisper started small, like faint cracks in a wall you don't notice until it's too late. It began with a phone call from one of my cousins. Her voice was hesitant, careful. "Hey, I don't want to stir things up, but Kyle called me. He said you were trying to cut him out of the family. He even hinted you might be manipulating Mom and Dad's will." My stomach dropped. "That's not true," I snapped, but she sounded unconvinced. The seed of doubt had already been planted. That was Kyle's game. Not just lawyers, not just threats. He was poisoning everyone else against me. Within days, it spread. An aunt texted me saying she'd heard things. A family friend avoided eye contact when I ran into her at the store. Even one of my coworkers gave me a strange look and asked if I was okay at home. Kyle was telling stories, twisting facts, making me out to be the greedy one. And it was working. At home, the tension was unbearable. My mom kept trying to keep the peace, begging me to just let things cool down. My dad was furious, pacing the house like a caged animal, muttering about betrayal. And me? I was drowning in the whispers, the suspicion, the constant fear that no matter what I said, Kyle was always one step ahead. One night while we were eating dinner, my mom's phone buzzed. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and her face went white. "What is it?" Dad asked. She handed him the phone with trembling hands. He read it, then slammed it down on the table. It was a photo of me, sitting in the cafe with Kyle, the envelope on the cable, my face pale, my eyes locked on him, and the caption underneath, "Making deals behind their backs." The air in the room froze solid. My mom looked at me like she didn't know me. My dad's jaw clenched so hard I thought he might break his teeth. "It's not what it looks like," I blurted out, panic rushing through me. "He called me there. He showed me things. I wasn't," but my words felt flimsy, weak against the image staring back at us. Kyle had set me up. He had planted the photo, twisted the narrative, and now even my parents were caught in his spiral. That night, lying awake in my room, I could hear my parents whispering down the hall. Their voices were low, urgent, but I caught enough. Words like trust, lawyer, what if? I pressed my pillow over my head, but it didn't block out the fear. Because no matter how much I told myself the truth would come out, it didn't feel like it mattered anymore. Kyle was winning, and I didn't know how much longer I could hold everything together before it all came crashing down. The next morning, I got my answer. A loud knock on the front door shook the house. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. Standing there, with that same smirk from the cafe, was Kyle. And he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a man in a sharp suit, holding a thick folder under his arm. Kyle leaned forward and said, almost cheerfully, "It's time we make this official." The moment he stepped over the threshold, I knew everything was about to blow apart. Kyle didn't wait for permission. He just waltzed into the living room like he owned the place, the man in the suit trailing behind him with that heavy folder hugged against his chest. My dad stiffened immediately, his knuckles turning white around the armrest of his chair. My mom hovered in the doorway, frozen, eyes darting between us like she was watching a train wreck in slow motion. I stood in the middle of the room, blocking Kyle's path. My voice shook as I forced out, "What are you doing here?" He smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile someone wears when they know they've already won. "Relax, sis," he said, dragging out the word sis like it was a joke. "I just came to have an honest conversation with the family." The lawyer, or whatever he was, opened the folder with a crisp flick of his wrist and laid a stack of papers on the coffee table. The sound of them hitting the wood was sharp, final. "What the hell is this?" my dad barked. Kyle's eyes gleamed. "A petition to contest your will, to make sure things are divided fairly." He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to sound menacing. "No favorites, no lies, no more secrets." My chest tightened, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You can't do this," I hissed. "This isn't your money to demand, it's theirs." He tilted his head, almost amused. "That's the thing, you're wrong. The law's on my side. And when people hear how you've been whispering in mom and dad's ears, trying to edge me out, well, you won't look so innocent anymore." My mom gasped. "Kyle, that's not..." But before she could finish, my dad slammed his fist on the table so hard the stack of papers jumped. "Enough." His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "You think you can walk into my house, threaten my family, and take what you haven't earned?" Kyle didn't flinch. If anything, his smile widened. The air was thick, electric, every second dragging like an eternity. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might faint. This was it. Everything we had tried to avoid, every whisper, every suspicion, it was all colliding in this one brutal moment. I wanted to scream at him, to grab those papers and tear them to shreds, to shove him out the door and lock it behind him. But I couldn't move. It felt like my feet were cemented to the floor. My mom's voice cut through the tension, shaking but desperate. "Please, both of you, stop this. You're tearing us apart." Kyle turned his gaze to her, his expression softening for just a second, then snapping back to cold steel. "I'm not tearing us apart. They are," he said, nodding toward me and Dad. "I just want what's mine." Dad stood up, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. He was trembling with rage now. "You want to talk about what's yours? Let's talk about what family means." He stepped closer, toe-to-toe with Kyle, the two of them staring each other down like predators ready to strike. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control, about power, about who would come out of this war standing and who would be left broken. The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I strongly suggest we discuss this matter calmly. These documents..." But Dad cut him off, his voice booming. "Get out, both of you." Kyle's smile faded for the first time, replaced with something darker, meaner. His jaw tightened. He leaned close enough that I could see the fury burning in his eyes. "This isn't over," he whispered. "You'll see." And just like that, he turned on his heel and walked out, the lawyer scrambling to follow. The door slammed shut behind them, rattling the frame. Silence swallowed the room. I could feel my mom trembling beside me, hear my dad's ragged breathing. My own chest felt hollow, my body buzzing with adrenaline and fear. Because deep down, I knew Kyle wasn't bluffing. He would come back, and the next time, he wouldn't just bring papers. He'd bring war. A week passed. No word from Kyle, no lawyer at our door, no whispered phone calls stirring up trouble. It almost felt quiet. Too quiet. I started to believe maybe, somehow, it was over. Maybe Dad's fury had scared him off. Maybe Kyle had finally realized he couldn't win. Then one morning, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, no name on the front, just our family's address typed neatly in block letters. I opened it, expecting another copy of the same legal threats. But it wasn't paperwork. It was a photograph. A picture of me, sleeping in my own bed. The curtains in the photo were drawn back, just a sliver, like someone had stood outside in the middle of the night and snapped it. Underneath, in red marker, was a single line. Family doesn't lock each other out.